Have you ever had a nightmare experience with those little neighborhood governments that seem to exist just to measure your grass with a ruler? Well, get ready for a story that takes HOA drama to a whole new level. This isn't just about a fine for a misplaced garbage can. This is about an entire house getting demolished and the epic fallout that followed. It all started when a man named Mr. Smith decided he wanted a quiet place to live. He found a nice house in a peaceful, well-kept community managed by an HOA. He paid cash for the property, looking forward to blending in and enjoying some privacy. For a while, things were perfect. He was a model resident, paid his dues on time, and kept his property immaculate. A was so low-key that his neighbors barely knew anything about him, other than that he was a polite, quiet guy. But as anyone who's dealt with a power-hungry HOA knows, peace can be very fragile. The trouble began with a single, trivial notice. The HOA claimed his mailbox was 1 inch too low. Mr. Smith, wanting to avoid any conflict, promptly adjusted it. But then came another notice. The shade of his front door paint was supposedly not on the approved list, even though it was the same color it had been when he bought the house. He repainted it. Then it was the type of flowers in his garden. Then the placement of his garden hose. It was a constant stream of petty violations, each one more ridiculous than the last. With every notice came a fine, and these fines started to stack up at an alarming rate. Mr. Smith tried to reason with the HOA board. He attended meetings, presented evidence that the violations were baseless, and showed that he was making every effort to comply. But the board, led by a particularly arrogant president named Karen, we'll call her Karen, wasn't interested in reason. They seemed to enjoy the power they held over him. They'd smirk during his appeals and dismiss his points without consideration. It became clear that this wasn't about community rules. It was a power trip. The fines ballooned from a few hundred to thousands of dollars. They added late fees, administrative fees, and legal fees, creating a mountain of debt designed to be impossible to pay off. Mr. Smith knew this was wrong. He consulted a lawyer who told him that fighting the HOA would be a long, expensive, and uphill battle. HOAs often have significant legal resources and can drag out cases for years. Undeterred, Mr. Smith decided to represent himself, spending his evenings poring over bylaws and state statutes. He filed a detailed dispute, outlining every false claim and procedural error the HOA had made. He sent it via certified mail, creating a clear paper trail. The HOA's response: they ignored it. Instead, they escalated their attack. They placed a lien on his property for the disputed fines. For those who don't know, a lien is a legal claim against a property for an unpaid debt. If you don't pay, the holder of the lien can eventually foreclose on your property to collect the money. It's an incredibly aggressive move, especially over fines for things like mailbox height and flower choices. Mr. Smith was stunned. He had provided a comprehensive legal dispute, and their answer was to try and take his home. This is where the story takes a truly shocking turn. While Mr. Smith was preparing his legal challenge to the lien, he had to go on an extended business trip. He was away for a few weeks, confident that the legal process would prevent any drastic action in his absence. It was wrong. The HOA board, led by Karen, saw his absence as an opportunity. They held an emergency meeting, citing ongoing and unresolved code violations and the abandonment of the property vendor. He was fully paid up on his mortgage and dues. Aside from the disputed fines, they voted to foreclose on the lien. But they didn't stop there. In a move of breathtaking arrogance and malice, they didn't just foreclose. They fast-tracked the demolition of the house. Their justification was that the property was a blight on the community due to the long list of fake violations they had invented. They hired a demolition crew, and while Mr. Smith was away, they tore his house down. They leveled it. All that was left was an empty plot of land and a pile of rubble. His furniture, his personal belongings, his memories all gone. Destroyed. Imagine coming home from a trip to find your house just gone. That's what happened to Mr. Smith. He stood there, on the sidewalk, staring at the empty lot, where his quiet life was supposed to be. The neighbors watched from their windows, so others with a sense of smug satisfaction, siding with the HOA's twisted sense of order. Karen, the HOA president, even had the audacity to walk over and hand him a bill for the demolition. She told him, with a triumphant smirk, You should have just followed the rules. Now the community is finally free of your problem property. At that moment, something inside Mr. Smith snapped. The quiet, reserved man disappeared. He looked at Karen, his eyes cold as ice, and said calmly, "You have no idea what you've just done." He pulled out his phone and made a single call. He didn't call the police. He didn't call his lawyer. He called the state's attorney general, and his first words were, "John, it's Governor Smith. I have a situation here. I need you to launch a full-scale investigation into the Preston Hills Homeowners Association. And I mean everything." Silence. The smug look on Karen's face evaporated, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. Governor Smith. Her problem resident. The quiet man she and her board had been tormenting for months was the governor of the entire state. He had intentionally kept his identity a secret, wanting to live a normal life away from the political spotlight. He used his middle name, went by Mr. Smith, and deliberately chose a home that wasn't the governor's mansion. He wanted to be a neighbor, not a politician. And in doing so, he had stumbled headfirst into a hornet's nest of corruption. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The Attorney General's office descended on the HOA with the force of a hurricane. They weren't just investigating the demolition. They were auditing years of financial records, reviewing every complaint ever filed, and interviewing dozens of current and former residents. What they uncovered was a cesspool of fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. The board members had been using HOA funds as their personal slush fund, paying for lavish vacations and personal expenses. They had been running intimidation schemes for years, targeting residents they didn't like with fake violations and excessive fines, forcing many to sell their homes at a loss. Karen and the entire HOA board were arrested. They faced a battery of criminal charges, including grand larceny, fraud, and property destruction. The story exploded in the media. It was the ultimate David versus Goliath story, except David turned out to be Goliath in disguise. The governor used his platform to advocate for sweeping HOA reform, passing new laws to protect homeowners from predatory practices and create state-level oversight. The governor sued the HOA and the individual board members personally. With the full weight of the state's legal apparatus behind him, the case was a slam dunk. The court awarded him millions in damages for the destruction of his property and personal belongings. The HOA was dissolved, its assets seized to pay the judgment. Karen and her cronies lost everything. They lost their own homes to pay the legal fees and damages, and they ended up serving prison time. The empty lot where the governor's house once stood became a symbol, a reminder of what happens when petty tyrants are given a little bit of power and a lot of arrogance. It's a wild story, but it's a powerful lesson. Never underestimate the quiet neighbor, and never, ever think you're above the law, because you never know who you're messing with. Thanks for watching. If you have your own HOA horror story, share it in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories. See you next time.